blockchain has always been a very interesting innovation for the sector. I remember about 11 years ago, when we set up a trade body called Innovate Finance in the UK, the first question that I received as the head of comms for that organization was from The Economist magazine. They called me up and they said, "We don't know much about fintech, but blockchain is very interesting, but I don't think it's going to work. We want to hear from subject matter experts that can explain how blockchain can really transform financial services when everything is so transparent." So fast forward now 11 years, and we still have that problem, right? So who wants to put all of their data on the blockchain? I mean, institutions now are really trying to engage in blockchain right now, but they're still having that trouble of trying to understand how do they keep information and data that shouldn't be public private while also maintaining compliance and trust. So this is what we're going to be talking about today in 20 minutes, because these gentlemen are part of a transformation where they are solving this dilemma. So the title of this panel is Enabling Institutional Adoption Through Rational Privacy. I don't know how many people have actually heard of this phrase, rational privacy. Does anyone know what that means? Everyone's shaking their heads. Okay. Those who aren't working for midnight. So this is going to be the catchphrase of 2025, I can assure you, at least in the world of Web3. Basically, rational privacy is the need to protect important information without making less usable systems, less usable, transparent, or trustworthy. So basically, it's about having your cake and eating it too. It tackles what's often called the privacy paradox. I'm sure you've heard of that, where organizations and people say that privacy matters, but their actions don't always reflect that. So for businesses, addressing this paradox means having clear data policies, giving users real control, and using privacy tech that supports innovation instead of blocking it. So to explore this theme of rational privacy, I'm thrilled to be joined by these three leaders at the forefront of this transformation. We have Anil Chopra, who's Director of Market Developing at Fireblocks. Fahmi Saeed, who's President of Midnight Foundation, which was just launched a couple of days ago. It's the organization that's leading the growth of Midnight, the hottest new blockchain innovation that blends public and private smart contract logic. You're going to talk a bit more about that. And then, of course, last but not least, Alex McFarlane, co-founder of Keyring, a company pioneering composable digital identity infrastructure. Now, I know we're fresh for time, so I really want to take a deep dive and ask you some really important questions. Fahmi, I'm going to start with you, actually, because obviously the Midnight Project is super exciting. Midnight has positions itself not as a privacy chain, but as a programmable privacy. Now, what does that distinction mean? And how does it help institutions build in compliance from the start?
Thanks, Georgia. And can everybody hear me? Yeah, good. And thank you, everybody, for being here. So when we think about privacy in the blockchain, we think about public chains, permissionless chains, where all your information is visible to everybody, immutable. So you might get docs, or your actions are traceable, versus the private chains which are permissioned essentially by private companies to handle information. And more recently, we've seen privacy chains where information is private and not visible like the public chains. And these are permissionless chains, and that has caused some concerns to regulators, and the use case of those, whether intended for good or bad, has raised some questions. So what we think about within Midnight is we have created a blockchain which gives you programmable privacy. The concept of rational privacy is that you have a public state, a private state, but everything gray in between. So when we walk around conferences physically, we will introduce ourselves to people. We are private until we make that introduction. Yeah. That is a selected disclosure. And then you extend that into further conversations, and you may transact and do business with that individual. And the same happens in the digital world. And what we're doing, rational privacy, programmable privacy, is giving developers, users to have the notion of issuing information publicly. So you can issue an RWA token publicly, but you should be able to hold it privately. And you should be able to transact with it privately and selectively disclose information to counterparties. That could be information to extend collateral and borrowing. It could also be information just to tell your tax accountant to file the relevant tax information. It could also be information that you share with regulator. And that programmability is what I think stands Midnight separate to other privacy chains.
But there's also something really unique about Midnight. You've got this concept of cooperative tokenomics and rational privacy, which feels tailored for cross-chain collaboration. So it's not about anymore this tribalism. It's about collaborating. Can you explain more about these two things, what they mean?
Yeah, so when we think about tokenomics, it's quite adversarial. It's adversarial in the sense everybody says, come and own my token. Come and build on my network. Connect and anchor yourself to what we do. But that token has two issues with it a few more, but two that we have highlighted in the sense that, first and foremost, you have to cannibalize the very token you want to grow and add value to pay for your transaction. You don't pay for your Apple iPhone using Apple shares. So that's a problem. And then secondly, in terms of to transact, you need to own that token. You need to, if you're coming from other chains, you need to own that token. Within Midnight, we have created a cooperative tokenomics. There's a Night token, which will be issued on Cardano as a native asset. We get the robustness and the security and everything that Cardano offers. That token will issue Dust. Dust is a private computational resource. If not a token, because it decays in value, cannot have a store of value. But that computational power gives you the ability to execute rational price, programmable price. And because it's not a store of value, it overcomes some of the regulatory issue about money laundering through private tokens. But more importantly, that token can be acquired by others without having to own Light. You could be delegated by users. So users of Ethereum, Solana, other chains may use the privacy component of Midnight because of that component. They're not buying a token, they're buying a subscription, a service to rational privacy.
Amazing. Thank you. Neil from Fireblocks. Well, Fireblocks works with some of the largest financial institutions globally. I mean, nearly 2,000, selling, managing trillions of dollars in assets. You must know what the concerns are for clients when it comes to privacy. Can you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple different avenues to explore privacy. And I think the exciting part that we're really seeing with initiatives like Midnight in the market is we grew out of the institutional crypto trading space. So 2018, coming out of Stealth, very much focused on that post-trade clearing and settlement and custody of those assets. And as we started to see additional use cases being adopted across other verticals is how we then started to expand, but everything in this sort of crypto trading ethos. When we now start to see more regulated institutions stepping in, this concept of privacy, KYC, is critical in order to do business with these other institutions. And so we're seeing one piece, which is much more on the KYC side of the house and saying, who is this person, or not who are they specifically, but what are the attributes that I can apply to them that have been verified or validated by someone else. Then there's the transactional side, which mentioning collateral is a really interesting one. And I think the way that you guys have sort of architected is really unique, because you can look at one chain that might be a private blockchain where you issue and manage assets and transactions on that specific blockchain. Having that interoperability component, knowing that we are in this multi-chain world, you may have a complex structured financial product issued on Ethereum and a stable coin that you're settling against it on Solana. But as you trade that asset, maybe there's a money market fund that's been issued on Cardano that now needs to be posted as collateral. You want to move that through Midnight to be able to post that. And I think the really important element is this sort of attribute stage where you can actually say, these are the components or pieces of data that I choose to keep private, versus here are the ones where I'm fine with this being out there in that ecosystem. So I think as we see the evolution and the adoption of a lot of these tools by more regulated traditional institutions, what we're seeing now is really the building blocks and the technologies that are being leveraged by the innovators, by the crypto natives and institutional trading firms, that will then be adopted and adapted by the traditional institutions to really help us scale. Because crypto is a market I think there's a cap at the amount of liquidity we can get into this space. What we need to do is open it up to the broader markets. And I think that is really how we do it, is working with the regulators, with the institutions to enable these types of tools.
Like so. Thank you. Alex, Keyring is tackling digital identity. This is one of the hardest problems in Web3, also in financial services generally. What are the risks of doing identity wrong when it comes to privacy, and how does composability change the game?
Hey, so I mean, is this on?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think we've seen today, am I right? And today or was it yesterday, Coinbase just had a massive PII leak.
Yeah.
And this is kind of one of the main issues of kind of storing physical copies of information and just making them accessible. I think it's unfortunate what happened with the team there, but I think it can happen to the best companies in the world, and that's one of the issues, right? You need to be able to disclose certain information, certain facts, without being able to actually disclose the information itself. And we can provide that with things like zero knowledge, and we can provide that with things like relying on someone else who's done this kind of task before. Like you can use with new technologies like MPC TLS. You can log in with your government account, right?
Yeah.
And there's no one else who's providing that information. Realistically, we're all secondary consumers of the information from the government in the first place. And it's probably better to have it in the government store, have it replicated amongst 10 different companies, especially when the area of deep fakes, deep learning, etc. It's not too hard to ultimately fake these kind of documents anyway.
Depends on which government, but yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of when you were saying in terms of like getting this adopted is really, really tough. And I think ultimately you need a capital market solution for this. If you try and force this through with like a committee or a shared standard, it's really tough, because generally these standards require many, many years and some kind of government intervention to gain traction. And realistically, what we're looking at is trying to find some area in the market, which we believe is via the rates markets, via borrowing and lending, where people have a real pain point of being hacked or losing their assets, where this is the area where people fundamentally want to share a little bit of information to know that there is a recoverability aspect of their assets should they lose them. And therefore, we liken it to putting a lock on your front door of your house. Ultimately, yeah, you're not going to stop like the KGB coming in, they'll just kick your door down, but you will stop the average person just wandering in and stealing stuff.
Yeah. I just have one more question, because, if the identity is the new parameter, how do we balance selective disclosure then with institutional requirements like KYC, AML?
Okay, that's a really interesting one. I think, how do we balance it? At the moment, I would say, if we're being quite honest about it, it's not really balanced in the sense that we have basically two religions almost if you think about it. There's one religion, which is kind of the SEC in, say, 2022, which is you can never do enough. And frankly, I think that's the approach of a few other regulators globally still. Then there's the approach of kind of your DeFi degens who will say anything is too much.
Yeah.
What we've noticed in the last, I would say probably 12 to 16 months, there's been a collapse in the belief systems of both of those participants. One side keeps getting hacked and the other side keeps not making any money.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, these guys don't want to get hacked. These guys want to make money. And they're agreeing in the middle, like, look, fundamentally, we all know that practically and operationally, a regulated institution like JP Morgan has done pretty good KYC on people. And the idea that you can fake that is quite difficult. So doing like a login with the JP Morgan account or login with your Coinbase or your Kraken or your government account is actually a far better solution than just duplicating it as a tick box exercise, which frankly, a lot of this stuff has been up to this stage.
Yeah, actually jumping in there too. I think this, over the years we've seen, I've been in the enterprise blockchain space for 8 years now.
Yeah.
Everything is coming to the middle. Everything is converging. It's one side versus the other. They have to come in the middle. And I think the really interesting part about identity is people have a conversation. I've been having this for a couple of years now with banks, is everyone wants to jump to this end state identity solution. What we need to do is find the step function to get there, which I think is going to start with more credentialing. As an example, we have tokenized money market funds on chain now. The issue that we have is the actual regulations around that and where the distribution can happen. So if we can just say, hey, I've onboarded to BlackRock to access BUIDL,
Yeah.
there's no reason any of the other fund issuers should have a higher KYC threshold than a BlackRock.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, the question is there a credential that an institution can provide that everybody else can have reliance on? Because as a fund manager, I don't really care where my token goes once I've actually issued. It can get traded and moved wherever it can according to regulations. And so if we can start to get to this credentialing aspect and then continue to build on it, we'll ultimately get to a point where we have this more robust KYC concept. But KYC is also a misnomer because everyone in blockchain doesn't want to know who you are.
Exactly.
They just need to know certain attributes about you. So it's again, this balance where I think we're going to have to ease into it, but it's got to be the right institutions that start to adopt it and drive it.
Okay, we don't have that much.
Yeah, the money market one's interesting. I think the money market funds not only the credentials, but are you in the right jurisdictions? You've seen tokenization of money market funds or yield-bearing funds come on chain, but there are funds. I know from my traditional finance background that some funds are US purses only, and there are non-international, non-US versions of the same fund.
Right.
And in the old days, you used to do that through paperwork, and you onboard, and then you phone through to the administrator of the fund to purchase that, or through the website. The solution today, in terms of whether you're mature enough or of the right jurisdiction, is to do a lot of that off-chain.
Yeah.
The problem with blockchain is most of the requirements are actually dealt with off-chain. There are funds that mature after 30 days, off-chain, and then bought on-chain once that restriction goes away. And what we're trying to do with the selected disclosures, the opportunity to program that in, is actually use those credentials as a gateway into the transaction.
Yeah.
And the programmability within Midnight enables that. So the first thing, and I'm going to move away from financial, let's talk about poker.
Yeah.
You go to a poker physically, a casino, you have to go past the bouncer. Once you pass the bouncer, you have to go to the desk where they check your credentials, give them your ID, then you're allowed to go in, they'll check your credit card, take down that amount. That's the physical world. Now let's take that into Midnight. In Midnight, you would present yourself into a virtual casino. The identity credential first will check, are you of the right age? Without disclosing your age, it will let you in. That's the first check. The next part of the programmability is, are you in the right jurisdiction? Are you in the right US state or the right country to be able to enter this casino? Third step is, I checked your credit balance. Now you're in. Now you're playing at the poker table. So that's how the Zcash programmability works. But the benefit of doing the Midnight is then you can also now see that the croupier has 52 cards in the deck, and that the deck has been shuffled, and there's not 5 aces in there or 6 pre's. So you now get a two-way proof, not just the proof of the person coming to the table. So that's where we see the future is. It's not just financials, medical data, all of this applies. And what we should accept, and one final thing I want to say before we close is, privacy is normal. That's what a panel I started on yesterday.
Right.
It is in your everyday life. It is in your digital world. And somehow in blockchain, it's been taken away from it. It's tornado cash, it's money laundering, it's all these other things. So it's time we reclaim privacy as our fundamental right. And we then bring that to the blockchain so we get demand from the big institutions, real people, real use cases. And with partners like Fivelocked, partners like Keyring, we hope that the evolution of where blockchain goes is along this line.
Yeah. I just have one more question I would like that, each of the panelists could answer. And now just building on what you just said, what's the biggest barrier we need to overcome to get there, to get to where we need to be?
I won't cop out and say regulations, but I will say standards. I think that will be the biggest hurdle because JP Morgan has different standards from HSBC, which has different standards from Ondo, et cetera. And so getting alignment on, again, what this step function is, what can we all agree on first to then build from there? I don't think it'll be one size fits all anywhere because it's institutional and jurisdiction based. So 10, 20, 30 years from now, cool, maybe we'll have this and we'll have WorldCoin and scanning our eyeballs and everything. But until then, I think having that proliferation of standards is going to be the biggest hurdle, but I think the biggest driver for where we can get.
So I agree with that. I will say something different. Removing tribalism.
Yeah, the tribalism. We got
all this. We are in blockchain because we want to innovate, we want to change. And if we keep fighting amongst ourselves, the big institutions will come and take over. and that we're already seeing that happen. So this cooperative tokenomics, we want to work with every chain, every builder. Come build natively, come use our subscription model to come and give you privacy, to extend privacy out of Midnight into your chain. Take that function. So let's work together. Let's try and do and change the world we wanted to change the world in before all the traditional institutional doctrines comes and sweeps us away.
Love it.
I'm going to be a bit controversial here, and I'm going to say just time, the passage of time. The reason I say that is because we actually did a bit of research on this, because obviously being in the space we're in, it's so difficult to move that product out. And we realized that every single primitive in traditional finance has proceeded in exactly the same order as those that have happened in DeFi. DeFi is exactly the same as TradFi, but has happened on a collapsed timescale. So what happened is we believe that we're basically in the point of 1970 in TradFi terms. What happened in 1960s is there was a lot of mafia action. People got really fed up of people getting kidnapped and disappearing all the time. And then the Bank Secrecy Act came into place and just slapped the mafia really hard. And so we're expecting that we're going to see a similar thing happen in DeFi. We're just on the point of where we call it the DeFi dollar market, basically starting to develop with the money market funds, the levered looping, the rehypothecation in a lower regulatory environment. And so we think the next step that's going to happen is basically the compliance angle, and then the privacy is pretty much straight away as well. And that's what we think. We think there's inevitability of it, and it's just a passage of time.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Creature and Privatism, right?